Maria Cristina, and so I have to remember to speak slowly. Please help me to remind, because sometimes I get a little bit carried away. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today about a topic which really is close to my heart, and that is how to combine, bring together, reconcile spirituality and research or science. So, for me personally, I feel sometimes these topics like a split, like a spagat, like two different worlds, and I'll explain a little bit about that. So when I was 15, I had to do some kind of presentation in school, and then I decided to talk about Sigmund Freud. I'm not sure you know, but this is like the father of psychiatry. I understood nothing, but there was something like an interest for me about how to explain the mind. And that took me, after a few years, to medical school, and I learned in psychiatry some things about how the mind works. And it's very useful. But I was not completely satisfied with the explanations that were given. So, at the same time, I did something else, but I will explain that later. In 2005, when I was working as a psychiatrist, I had my coming out that I was having interest in traditional medicines. And this may be not such a huge deal for people who are here, but in the medical world it is. And I explained them that I'd like to do research on how to integrate this in psychiatry. And I did this now for 25 years this year, focusing very much on the scientific approach and on like brain health. Then, a little bit more secretly, I looked at a different way of learning about the mind. Of course, as you know, and also self-healing and Tibetan Buddhism, and learning more about the spiritual part. And so this year, I had my second coming out. So I told to my scientist and medical doctor colleagues that on top of traditional medicines, I actually have my best interest is in spirituality, which is maybe even worse for them. So I'm not sure how long they will allow me to do my work, but the way I feel is makes it clear that there's more or less two sides, two approaches within myself, and I have a little bit difficulty to bring them together. So it feels like a split, like a gap. And I will go into that in a little bit more detail. Oh, sorry. So it's got a little bit stuck. Here you are. So this year, I got appointed a research chair in spirituality, lifestyle, and mental health care at Groningen University, which is in the north of the Netherlands, 2 hours above Amsterdam, to give you some idea. And our university is a big one. We have 37,000 students, and they call it the top 100 university in the world, which dates back to 1614. And the faculty where I'm placed used to be called the Faculty of Theology, so studying religion and God. But they changed their name to Religion, Culture and Society, because they realized that now in our society, in these years, many people are not so much more connected to one religion, but are looking for different ways how to live their religion, either with the church, without the church, or having a different path. And so they wanted to change the name as well. So this means that from now on I will a little bit more into research and teaching, and a little bit less into treating patients. But it's still another step in integrating the both ways. And I say this also because I think not only from a personal level, there's also a professional split in our society. So many people feel they have to be either scientific or religious. And many people also see religion now as like some kind of naive blind faith, whereas science is the enlightenment of reason, the crown of the human evolution, something you would like to be part of. And so in Holland we have one professor, he's called Van Schaik, and some years ago he did a personal interview about his work, and then he said he had seen something in a patient which was the work of God. And then there was a big discussion, because people could not somehow accept that somebody who was representing science was saying something about religion. This was such a big deal that in the end he lost his job. He was kicked out of his work, because we have somehow an incompatibility of being religious and scientific at the same time. You have to be one or both. So where does it come from? This was a question I talked to myself, because I also feel it. And so I looked a little bit back in history. And do you know who is this man? Copernicus, yes. It's a little bit, his name is already there. And so in 1 year before he died, in 1543, he published a book. And basically, to put it very short, he was saying, it is not the earth that is the center of the universe, it's the sun. And the difficulty he got is that the church had written many things, and it was having a worldview where the earth was the center because God had made it. So the Inquisition was sent to him. And it happened again also to this man. Who is this? Galileo Galilei. I put your flag here because it's Italian, especially for tonight. A few decades later, but he was basically saying, this guy is right. And because he was saying that, he also got difficulty with the church and was prosecuted by the Inquisition. So there it shows that there was the first split between the scientific approach of how the world works and the religion. And that was built upon by this man. Who's this? Descartes, René Descartes, French. But I put our flag here, Dutch flag, because he spent most of his life in Holland. Actually, he worked at the university in the north, not in Groningen, but in Franeker, and later in Amsterdam. He had a girlfriend there. But he is most, he had this love there. He is most well known and most cited for like making this famous quote, "Cognito ergo sum," which means "I think, so I am." He was emphasizing that the mind and the brain, the mind and the body, are two completely different aspects of our being, which are not, one cannot be reduced to the other. But he had a big problem explaining and understanding how they interact. And I think this is more or less a very short version of the history. And so after that, there was even some kind of competition between these two ways of approaching life. Like, about the nature of the truth or reality. Is God the origin of our life, or is it evolution? Is the sun the center or the earth? But also, what can you do to improve your life, to take away suffering and to have more happiness? So, is it either being virtuous, not doing sin, or is it research and progress? So there's some kind of tension or even competition. And then there is, maybe you know, a famous story about Alexander the Great, who met a yogi. You know the story? Alexander the Great was conquering the world. He was going around and making his territories bigger. And then he got to the east. And in the east, he saw one man sitting on the ground, fully covered with ashes and long hair. And he said, "What are you doing?" And the man says, "I am trying to experience nothingness." And he thinks, what's the use? And then the yogi says to him, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm trying to conquer the whole world." The yogi looks to him, what's the use? So it's an explanation of two different approaches of what is most important or what we should strive for. You could also call it the way of the astronaut, exploring outer space, or the way of the psychonaut, exploring inner space. It's two different approaches. But it may seem a little bit trivial, but I think the stakes are very high, because these things, which are often not explicit, but more inside ourselves, they determine where you put your time, your money, where is authority, where do you go when things go really bad. This is where you go, depending on which kind of view of life you have. So it's quite important. And somehow, most of us, we feel it impossible to have both. We have to make a choice, it seems. How does it go now in present times? What you see here are the brains, and here you see one explanation on the internet about the Earth, and you see everything is about matter, mixture of gases, liquids. So we have, I think, a time where we have left the traditional religious paths. We have a secularization, we call this. And we see that from 2007 to 2020, 43 out of 49 countries, specifically in the Western modern rich world, they saw a sharp decline of religion, more than the years before that. And I think we have now a dominance of materialism. When you look at the media, when you look at the newspapers, when you have talk shows, everything that's being said is mostly dominated by this worldview of materialism, of Alexander the Great, of matter, of science, if you will. And one of my colleague psychiatrists wrote a book which was in Holland quite famous, maybe also here, I don't know. It's called We Are Our Brains. This was the title. And if you give a title like that, I think it shows that you say that this is the most essential part of our lives. This is where it comes from. This was a very big one. And it's a way of saying biological reductionism. And it's even in our language. So we say, does it matter? And it means, is it important? So is it matter? Is it important? And also we say, every body here. We never say every mind here. So we have a way of using language which shows, exposes us to what kind of way we have where the most important part is, the mind or the matter. And so now we feel, as scientists, very proud of ourselves that we have understood everything and explained the whole world. But there is one thing which is called the heart problem. Do you know what it is? The heart problem in science says, how is it possible that brain cells generate consciousness? I think the question is even wrong, because the question already implies that it's the cells that is primary and the consciousness comes from it. This is the way you see it all over the internet. If you Google the heart problem, you'll find this. I think we should rephrase it. How do body and mind mutually reinforce or influence each other? Most of the consciousness researchers, they agree about this point. They say there's no evidence that brain is more important or more primal than mind. The influence is two ways. Maybe we should even call it the mind-brain that shapes itself constantly, whether we are aware or not. It depends. So I think that I like the last one best, because it shows that mind and brain are connected always, and it's going in one kind of direction depending on the choices we make. So a little bit back to religion. I'm saying these words because maybe I'm not completely the average person, but in Holland we are in the top 5 countries of the world where we are the least religious now. I think it's different from Italy. I'm sure it's different from Italy. If you look around the world, you can see that 83% of the world population is connected to a religion. For my colleagues, this is kind of astonishing. We don't realize this, but it's important to realize. So here are the Catholics, Protestants, then you have Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, non-religious. These are the other religions are all the folk traditions and the smaller shamanists, etc. And then the atheists and non-religious. So you can see this adds up to about 14%. So almost 85% of the world population is still affiliated with religion. But this is maybe difficult to see. I will talk you through it. Here you can see the most and the least religious countries in the whole world at the present time. So in blue, it's saying, I do believe in God. In red, I do not believe. Yellow, I'm not sure, or I don't know. So I took the last part from here, and I put it a little bit bigger here. So here's Italy. Italy is 65% of the population in Italy says, I believe in God. And about 14% is not sure. And look at the Netherlands, it's the other way around. 34% says yes. Many people say no, I'm not sure. So this is, in our country, is really important. Why is it important? In many ways. But one of the things we have now is there are too many people asking for mental health. And one question we have, one hypothesis, is that people used to turn to the pastor or somebody from the church for help or for the community, and they now go to the psychologist or the coach. But there are so many people coming that we cannot deal with it. Now almost 1/4 of the population has a mental health issue, but we only have a capacity for about 6% of the population, so it will never work. So maybe we need religion after all, I'm not sure. Okay, so maybe you ask, where are we going now? But as we are so much attached to matter and brain, people started thinking, maybe there is one spot in our brain, the God spot. And that will explain why we have these feelings or this interest or this way of looking at the world. And it was supposed to be here, so a little bit above your ear. And but afterward it was left because it turned out, if you look well, the whole brain is something is happening during religious experiences or prayer. It's not just one spot. So it was left and thought it was a little bit ridiculous, but I think we may have a new candidate, and I will explain that. Because this is a short neuroanatomy of our brain. So if you cut me like this and you look from there, hopefully you'll see about this. And you see 3 layers. So I think last time we did the hand. Did you do this the last time? No. Okay, so maybe you do your hand like this. If you put your hand, we mimic this a little bit. So this is the brain stem. Here is the emotional brain. It's also called the reptile brain, emotional brain. And on top of that, we have our cortex. This is the anatomy of our brain. And the interesting thing is that this part of our brain, the frontal lobe, this is a very important structure because it was developed latest in our evolution. And the funny thing is, in humans, it is very big. So I brought you one brain. So it's not real, don't worry. So if you put like this, you can see this part. This is the frontal lobe. This is very big. It's here. And there are several explanations for that. We have one protein which makes special cells grow. Maybe it's also because of our diet, eating a lot of omega-3 fatty acids. I'm sure Bernard has some idea about that. Maybe we'll hear later. But there was a very sharp growth of our frontal lobe in the last thousands of years. This is what distinguishes, because in animals it's about 5 to 10%. So it's really something different. And this is related to a unique capacity we have to reflect upon ourselves and to direct our behavior. So this part of the brain, it's so big, it helps us to direct our mind, our brain, our mind-brain, in the right direction. And that is quite unique for humans. Other mammals don't have that. So, and especially there. So if there would be a God spot, I would suggest we should take this area. So if you put your hands like this, it's where it's the nails of your middle 2 fingers. We call it the medial prefrontal cortex. And this area, this has an influence on all 3 layers. So it influences the human brain, the cortex, the ratio, the emotions, and also the instinct and automatic behavior. So everything comes together there. So, and it's also stimulated, it's growing with mindfulness, relaxation, and reflection. So if there would be one kind of God spot, I would say it might be this one. Or I put later, last night, because then I remember, if to be correct, there is one more, and it's quite close to where they used to think it was the God spot. And this is the insula. And the insula is one structure which is, it's in here. If you go in here about 3 centimeters over there you find a spot which is also very important in integrating all different signals of our mind and brain, involving cognitive, emotional, motivation, sociability, many different ones. And if it's damaged, then you get a lot of mental disorders. So if there was a God spot, it should be either this one, I think, or here. These are 2 important structures to remember. Maria, are you still okay? Okay. So, back to our daily lives. This is one slide I make with kind of impression of Western life as we have it now. It may be a little bit critic, but I think most of us, we are overstimulated, multitasking, and looking for sensory pleasure. These are the 3 most things we do. We get stimulated through all different kind of bleeps and these kind of things which show us push messages or other kinds of things. And they keep our mind busy all the time. We start running. We are walking now 10% faster than 10 years ago in all the big cities around the world. Somehow we are increasing our pace. We don't like the night so much, so we increase the day by having artificial light, so we make the day longer and the day and night shorter. So we keep running all the time. And that gives us in a state of anxiety or of fear or stress. And this is a simplified version, but I'm sure you know it. When something happens, you freeze, you feel fright, and it's either fight or flight. These are if you look deeper, there are others as well, but I'm not going into detail today. These 2 are also there, but the most important ones are here. So you see something which is fearful, and then we have release of 2 of the hormones or neurotransmitters, adrenaline and cortisol, which help us to take action. This is the gas of the car. But of course, if you want to be safe, you also need a brake. And luckily we have, and that is the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the nerve going down, and it's like it's cooling down. So it diminishes our heartbeats, the blood pressure, and internal organs. So these 2 should be in balance. And if they are, then we are thriving. So in a situation where you are calm, relaxed, nothing fearful is happening, then these parts of the brain, remember the ones who are in humans so big, they are very active. And then we are rational, then we are able to control ourselves, then we have insights, and everything goes down. But if we are stressed and fear comes from deep inside, then it's the other way around. And then the fear is central and we are not rational anymore. We lose this part of the brain because the input from the fear is so strong. And it can also come from deeper levels. So again, we need a balance between this, and this is another aspect of feeling and thinking. So now we're going to go into details. No, joking. The basic point here is it's very complex. That's all we need to know. It's a very complex thing. And I'd like to share with you a few things which I think are very interesting. So this one, I will just show it around wherever it likes. Lama, you go first. This organ, this is only 2% of the weight of our body. but it takes 1/4 of the energy we have. That's strange, no? There's something that's very small, and it takes 1/4, so it should be very important. And so there was a very interesting researcher who thought, maybe we can do some tests to find out how that works. So people were in rest, relaxation, and then they were giving a specific task. And the researcher's idea was to see how much more energy that would take. But he was wrong, because when we do a specific task from a resting state, the energy amount goes down. And it took quite some years for the Western scientists to understand what happens. And that is because we have a default mode network in our brains. That means there is something going on all the time. In the Eastern traditions, they call it the monkey mind, or inner dialogue. And there you can see it very clearly on brain scans if this is active. And in most of us, it is. The only problem is, it's usually not so doing the right things. So it's very busy with things which are not so needed. So you can see here, these are the parts of the brain which are called the default mode network. And so when it's active, we have inner dialogue. We talk to ourselves. Or we talk back how, oh, I was there, and maybe he didn't look at me, and maybe I should have looked, and if I would go there, then we don't know. All of these things, no? And usually it's also from a negative emotion. So I'm stupid, fat, ugly, I will always be alone, and nobody will love me anymore. Something like this. And it's also remember to the past and imagining the future, usually in some kind of anxiety, I need this, I want this, like the grabbing they explain us in desire in the Tibetan system. So I think this monkey mind they are referring to is the default mode network. And when it's too active, it takes a lot of this energy. So it explains, even if we are sitting just like this, we are losing 1/4 of our oxygen and glucose, so our energy, because of all this rumination going on all the time. And we know now from sociology research that we have about 70,000 thoughts every day, but about 80% is the same as yesterday. So it's just repeating mostly negative things. It's usually anger from what has happened that shouldn't have happened, or fear for what may going to be happen that should not happen, or we lose something which was dear to us. Basically, the Buddhist teachings. And so the interesting part was, this explained why we are just sitting down, being miserable. We are going to ruminate all the time, and we lose all this energy. So if you give then a specific task, go calculating or make a drawing, then the default mode network goes down, and so your energy is better spent. But you can go even further. So if you go on top of that with meditation, the energy loss is even lower than during a specific task. So you are losing less of this oxygen and glucose than we do when we are normally miserable. So we could, I think, explain, one metaphor came to my mind, when you have a light bulb, like the old ones, you have this light bulb, like the round, and then it gives a lot of heat, a little bit low light. In this kind of lamps, 95% of the energy goes to heat, and only 5% to light. So it has a very low efficiency. If you put the same energy in a bulb like that, and you put everything together, then you have a laser. And it could cut through iron. So if everything is resonated, then you don't lose so much energy. And this is true in light. I think the same is for our minds. So if we learn to train our minds, we lose less through the default mode network, and we are more efficient in our lives. Oh, and besides, if it goes all the way, we also feel unhappy. So a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. It's also one of the conclusions there. So even more reason, be effective and being more happy. So this brain-mind, this complex of the brain and the mind, which influences each other all the time, it shapes itself, and we can give it a direction. It doesn't have to be just shaping itself. We can do something, right? We have a choice there. If you look from the mind, from the mental part, this is of course the teachings of meditation, mind training. You can consciously direct your mind. If we look from the aspects of the brain, which is somewhere around, so from the meta points, we have 3 aspects of our brain which guide the flow of information. This is the structure, the connections, and the neurotransmitters. So I'd like to go a little bit more in detail, and then we go to the funny part. So stick with me, okay? So structures, this one I already explained. The main point is we have an ancient reptile brain. It's about 300 million years old. Then we have a little bit less ancient, more modern mammal's brain, which is mostly about fear, danger and emotions. And we have the human brain, the neocortex. So this is a way of dealing with different aspects. So in things are intuitional, if it's instinct, if it's about survival, we go there. If we feel, it's about here. And if we think about it, and if we make conscious decisions, it's here. And this is the way the brain works. Then maybe you know, who has the brain now? It's here. Okay, then can I just I grab it for 1 second. Yeah. Can I have your brain, please? Oh, okay, no problem. So maybe you noticed that it's also divided, the brain, into 2 structures we call hemispheres. So I'm going to dissect my brain now. Okay, so it's like this, and we have 2 hemispheres, right and left. And very interestingly, for many years, people thought that right is for visual tasks, and left is for language. But it seems that it's a little bit more complicated than that. Actually, the most recent research says these 2 hemispheres are 2 different ways to relate to the world. One is more about the howness, how is the world? That's the left one. And the right brain is about the whatness. So it means that these structures didn't divide tasks like you go for language, I go for images. It's more like, how do I relate to myself and the others? So in our right hemisphere, we have a map of ourselves in relation to the outer world. In our left hemisphere, it's more about ourselves. In our left hemisphere, it's fixed concepts. Things are like this. In our right hemisphere, we have an open experience. We just feel what happens. Yes, there is more language and more ratio on the left one, and more intuition and images in the right one, but it's also divided. Both can do both. But the most important one is, and that's quite new, is that they have a different way of perceiving the self and the world. It's the whatness and the howness of how life is. And in between, there's one structure. You know how it's called? Corpus callosum, which means there is information going up and down. But the interesting thing is, because they have different ways of relating to the world, these corpus callosum is also inhibited. So there shouldn't go too many information to the left or to the right. And that is something that's found out new. Okay, so the structures, this is one way, looking from the material point of view, how the mind-brain functions and how the flow of energy goes. The second one is about connections. And this is also quite astounding. We have 100 billion neurons, and all of them have 500 connections. 5,000 connections or synapses. So these kind of things which connect them together. And each of them fires 5 to 50 times each second. So try to imagine that. 100 billion neurons, all like a knot inside your head, and then all connected and firing all the time. This makes it a little bit more understandable why it takes so much energy, right? This quarter. But it's even more interesting is that the connections we can make with all of these neurons and connections, all the possibilities we have, is a 10 to 1 million. I don't know how you say this when you have 10 to the factor 2 is 100, to 3 is 1,000, right? So this is 10 to 1 million. So very big. Just to give you a comparison, all the atoms in the whole universe is 10 to 80. So we have far more possibilities in our brain than there are atoms in the complete universe. That made me think about how Rinpoche used to say there's as much space, inner space, as outer space. There's something similar. There's the amount of connections or possibilities is incredible. And this makes it also understandable that we can train, because what means when we train our brain, it means that we change our connections. These connections, all these billions of neurons with all their connections, they are not completely fixed. Some of them are changing. This happens all the time. And this can be increased when you do practices. So being a yogi you are like an Olympic champion of making new connections, because you are so aware of your mind that you can have the connections wherever you like. And this way of changing connections and making new flow of structures, we call it neuroplasticity. And this is important, because when I was trained, we used to think if you damage the brain and you lost it, it's gone. It will never recover again. But the brain has some capacity to recover. And so it's called neuroplasticity, so it can change again. So think if there's a breakage between connections, it can be reconnected, and it allows us adaptation. So I remember La Michelle many times explained about how we need change, because there's change, things can go different. Because there's there's no constant. Everything is in constant transformation. This is why we can change. And this is something similar in the brain. So these connections are all the time being made and broken and made again. And this allows us to adapt to the outer world. And we need some substance for that. And it's called brain-derived neurotropic factor, which is kind of a hormone, which helps us to make and break these connections. And that brings us to our third part, how the brain deals with information. So first there was the structures, the 3 layers. Then there was the connections. And now we look at neurotransmitters. And then we see that, for instance, mindfulness meditation calms down the default mode network, the monkey mind. And it also makes more connection between the default mode network and the rest of the brain. And it does so by, sorry about this slide, it's a little bit difficult maybe. But this is basically saying there is a very high possibility that this substance is causing the transformation of ourselves, the neuroplasticity. So mindfulness, if you meditate mindfulness, you increase one substance, and this substance helps us to make new connections in your brain. And so this explains how the link between mindfulness and changing your brain. But there's more, and there's one I'd like to mention in particular, because it's very much related to difficulties we now have in the world. And that's dopamine. You know about dopamine? Yeah. Who has an iPhone? Yeah, then you know about dopamine. No, it's everything that we feel good, I want more, likes, mentions, connections, images, presents, drinks, cigarettes, compliments, whatever, then we get a burst of dopamine. But what is the point here? This system, it's like we are now dopamine addicts because it's being stimulated so much that we cannot do without. To give you one example, in this year now, we get as much information as a person in one day as a highly educated person 500 years ago would get in a whole lifetime. Just think about it. A whole lifetime of information we get now every day. It's about 13 gigabytes, if you want to know, or about 13 videos or films altogether. And all of this information is coming from all different sides. It's always increasing this system, and we are so much increased that we cannot do without. But the problem is, dopamine cannot sustain our feeling of happiness. It is vluchtig. How do you call vluchtig in the... Sorry? Yeah, it's gone before you know it. We need more of the other one, the two are balanced, and that's called serotonin, because serotonin can sustain our well-being and our mood and our will. But the problem is that dopamine drives down serotonin. So the more we are working either with our laptop or computer or smartphone or whatever we are doing, the more we do, the more we get addicted to this one, and the less we have of serotonin. And this is one of the factors which increases depression, addiction, and anxiety in our world. Also, chronic stress drives both of them down. So the more you look for pleasure, or better for kick, if you go for a kick, the less happy you will be, because the system takes down your feeling. Okay, so who knows another neurotransmitter? Melatonin, sure, yeah. It helps us to sleep. It's being generated spontaneously around 6 or 7 at night. There are many. Just to mention a few, maybe it's interesting to learn about how these things work, mainly in our brain, but also in the rest of our body. Acetylcholine we need for learning and memory. If you don't have enough, you get Alzheimer, to make it very short. If you have too much, you get muscle pain. Glutamate is for activation. So people with psychosis who don't have any energy to do something, they don't have enough. If you have too much, you get obsessive-compulsive disorder. So you get too stressed out. GABA we need for relaxation. If you don't have enough, again, in obsessive-compulsive disorder, too many is mainly in substances. And so on. So we see that all of these different neurotransmitters, we need a balance. Too much is not okay, too little is also not okay. We need, it regulates the flow of energy through our brains. So to give you the summary, and Maria, I helped you to take out the tables. This is a little joke for Maria, but she was translating very difficult slides, and I thought I'd maybe take out is better, make it more easy. So this is a summary of all the research that's been done on meditation on the brain. So I already mentioned it increases this process of making new connections, which we call neuroplasticity by brain-derived neurotropic factor. We see more gray matter, that means cell bodies, and which also controls movement, emotion, and memory. We see a decrease of our alarm system. The amygdala, if you put like this, the amygdala is here, is in our emotional brain, and it's telling us it's dangerous here. I'm not safe. If it's too active, everything can be an alarm, and you are stressed out all the time. So we need to slow it a little bit down. Then there's also one aspect of meditation that it slows down the age decline of the brain, and I'm not going to go into detail, because Paola Muti, who's sitting there, she's going to tell a little bit more the next 2 days about this effect. Then there is the the default mode network I told you about, the monkey mind, remember, going everywhere all the time. It's cooling down with meditation. We have more attention, more cognitive control, emotional control, and we have this area here which gives us more insight in ourselves, self-awareness. All of these things are being done by meditation. But what's even more interesting is it's not a state. Some of these things are also a trait, which means it doesn't just go away if it's done many times. It can stay in our system. So for many years, people thought that meditation is nice, gives you some more better emotions and a little bit more attention, but when you stop the meditation, it will be gone. But it's not like this. If you do for many times with a lot of repetition, it stays in your brain. It really is different in your trait. Okay, I'm going to skip this now just to give you one example here. There are different kinds of meditation, of course. So you have mantra repetition, or you have attention, or loving kindness. And we now find different spots in our brains which are related to different kind of meditations. So we do not only know it changes the brain, but even where different kind of meditation changes our brains. And then I'd like to say a few words about this man. This man I met last year in the conference of psychiatry in Holland. This is Dr. Newberg. And he did something similar. He was looking at brain research, not based on meditation, but on religious experience. So he put people who have religious experiences, either spiritual or with a God of Maria or Jesus or oneness experience or whatever it may be, and he put them in an fMRI or even in an MRI and looked at changes. And what he saw were typically three things. I'm summarizing now about 40 years of research in 3 lines. The frontal lobes, maybe you remember this one. This one is less active when people have a religious experience. So there's less control. There's more the sense of surrender to the experience. Then the parietal and occipital lobes, who are here, they also decrease, and it changes the sense of self. And this may explain why many people who have a spiritual experience have some kind of feeling of being one with others, with the whole world, like a oneness experience. This seems related to these lobes getting less activity. And then again, the insula, I mentioned a few times here, a little bit deep, is about interior states. So these are the changes that he saw during spiritual experiences. And again, like meditation, in the emotional brain, we see there is a change in the field of reality, cognitive and emotional control. So we see a lot of changes in spiritual experiences, religious experiences, and meditation experiences. So now I get more to the juicy side, and that is about this project. Anyone know about this project? This is called the Shamatha project. To some of you I mentioned some years ago before. This is a place in the mountains in Colorado where they started in 2007, and they did a huge experiment about the effects of meditation on people. They asked people to stay there for a retreat for 30 days, meditating 10 hours a day, similar like an intensive retreat we have. They had to be screened and tested before, of course. And they would go in between sessions. They would either meditate or be part of research. So it's quite tiring. So they had to go to the EEG and then do a meditation again. And then they had to draw blood and go to meditation again and so on. Fill out forms. And this was done in 2007. It became very well known because this project is basically the origin of a lot of the research I just showed you. So how come we know so much about the brain and its effects and the lobes and the connections is due to this project because they decided to have 30 people for 3 months there and then a new group after 3 months and again, so measuring all the time. And they found a lot of publications came afterwards. So you can see all of these also in quite important journals. So that gave a lot of, say, an explosion of research on meditation. 7 years later, they asked again the people who participated 7 years before, and they could still measure differences compared to controls 7 years afterwards. So it really showed what I just mentioned. It's not only a state, it also changes your mind, your brain as a trait. So some of the people who were involved in that is Richard Davidson and Mathieu Ricard, you can see here. And they did this kind of analysis. And I have to tell this joke again, maybe you already heard before. But they started this project because they had working with the Dalai Lama, His Holiness Dalai Lama. They got one fax from Dharamsala in the 90s. And it was saying something like, hey guys, listen, I'm very good at meditation, you are good at making images, shall we work together? Something like this is my thought. Anyway, they did a huge project, and then they went to Dharamsala, and then there was a big announcement, now we're going to do scientific research on the effects of compassion meditation. And these scientists from the other side of the world, they will show that it really works. So all the monks and lamas are there, 500 in a whole big hallway, and there is Richie together with Mathieu Ricard on stage, and he puts on the EEG on his head, like this. And everybody starts to laugh, so hard, because of course everybody knows that compassion is not here, but it's here. So how can you measure here? And I think this is one transcultural misunderstanding. So this research was very instrumental in getting more knowledge. So some years ago, we tried to add a little bit to it. And this was La Michelle at the Congress Integrated Psychiatry in 2015. And we decided to do a workshop to maybe we could show something real time on a screen what was happening when La Michelle was meditating. And the idea is that what he's making here, we call this neurofeedback, which is like you can see on a screen what happens in your brain when you are doing a task. So it's like this. You see there the EEG as somebody is doing a task or a meditation. And the funny thing of this experience was that the moment Wietse, my friend, puts on the EEG to La Michelle, he says, no, wait, don't start meditating yet. And La Michelle says, I'm not doing anything. And what the funny thing there, actually it's very important, what he saw was in the resting state, to put it simple, La Michelle doesn't have a monkey mind. Because the default mode network, which was always similar with people and showing all this activity, it only calms down during meditation. But when you do a lot of meditation, then it gets so much change for always, that even though you do not meditate, there's also always meditation in the mind. It's like a meditative brain. And it was shown there. It was not planned, it just happened there. But I think it was very funny. Then there was another experience with Lama Ganchen. Even a few years before, we had our first conference, and Bernard, you are there as well in the talk about nutrition. And the day before this conference, we had a small workshop with heart coherence variability. Maybe you heard about this. This is a sensor you can put on your finger or your ear, and it shows very subtle variations in your heartbeat. When you breathe in, your heartbeat is a little bit faster, and if you breathe out, it goes a little bit slower. This is normal. It should go like this. And if you have a positive emotions, this goes very nicely. You can see it as a rhythm on the screen. So the one who was there was actually the director of the Benelux of this institute. He saw Lama Ganchen. He said, would you please come with me and show your meditation? And Rinpoche said, yes, okay. So he sat down, and then this man asked him, before meditation, he asked him, did you ever experience something traumatic? And then there was a very high peak showing exactly where you could measure this as a negative emotion there. And then he said, could you now do a meditation, some kind of meditation? And the peak went completely away, and then there was like some kind of, it's like a coherent scale, and it went through the roof. It was higher than could be measured. And so the guy was very surprised, and he said, this is actually like a textbook of somebody who did experience traumatic things, but has completely worked through it, and now he can direct and go back in his memory either to the trauma or to being in a peace with himself. He can do both. And then Rinpoche sat down at dinner and that night, and he was making some small talk with people sitting next to him. So he asked them, well, what you do? I'm a psychiatrist. Oh, nice. So what's your most recent discovery in psychiatry? What is now very important for you? And then the man said, yes, we found out that body and mind are connected. And then Rinpoche says, interesting, this is what Buddha Sakyamuni said 2,500 years ago. But it's interesting, this body, mind matter, this distinction is always there, and still we are confused about how does really work. How do mind and body really connect to each other? Then I'm going to go to my finishing. Lama Gangchen wrote a medicine Buddha sadhana, and maybe you know that this is a quote from the medicine Buddha sadhana. Medical research has made great advances. Many sicknesses have been eradicated and death have been avoided. But no single therapeutic system can offer an answer to all the complex, multiple physical and mental problems. Modern medicine, natural medicine, and spiritual medicine can contribute to the creation of a new wisdom vehicle to deal with the sicknesses and difficulties engulfing our world. For me, this has also been a very inspiring vision that Rinpoche showed us here. And but the word spiritual medicine is a little bit difficult one in my world, because some kind of spirituality, be kind, nice, friendly, is okay, but calling it medicine is a little bit difficult. So many people object to that. But I think I just showed you that we at least now know that meditation and religious experiences do really have a change in the brain, and it could even last for many, many years afterwards. So I thought, why don't we make Shamatha 3.0? So this is my proposal. I'm quite serious, actually. I would very much like if we could do something similar what they did in Colorado, but do it here. And look at all the different things that people experience when they go to Albagnano as a place of pilgrimage, or being in a pure environment, like we have here, or being in this Gompa, doing sessions, having longer retreats, to do all different kind of research. I don't think there's anything new to discover that Rinpoche didn't know about. At least I'm not going to do that. I would not be capable. But I think this is, in our time, science is such an important factor. And if we could show things we experience ourselves during meditation, we could show it in a scientific way, it might help to bring it to attention to many people who need it in our world and make it more open for them. So we made some steps in the last years. We did some things. And we made a short video, maybe you know, about 37 minutes of La Michelle guiding the practice in a more sober way, in a less complex way. And some years ago, I convinced 17 colleagues, mindfulness meditation practitioners, to do self-healing. So here they are doing the Karuna mantra. They were a little bit shocked, because it's really different than mindfulness meditation. But many of them sticked around, and they even liked it, and they now even request to do again. So we have some positive experiences there. And Paula, many times we already prepared to do this research also with your patients and for different groups. Then Corona came and many other things happened, but still there was some start there. And also with Adine and many others, and Tanya, we talked about maybe having a research group to do also research on the environment, on the Borobudur. There were many different ideas. So my wish is to put new energy in this project, and whoever likes to participate and talk about it, and if La Michelle thinks it's a good idea to have a project, Shamatha 3.0, we make it the Albagnano project to do research on that. And I hope then, in that way, we can reconcile the approach of science and spirituality, or religion and research, of mind and matter, of the psychonaut and the astronaut, of the brain and the consciousness, of the inner world and the outer world. Because I think there are several paths to Rome, or several paths to Albagnano, different approaches we can take. And I hope in this way we can contribute to fulfilling Lama Gangchen's vision of a new wisdom vehicle for this world in need. So, thank you very much. Bernard, maybe do loud and I repeat.
Rogier, I thought you did an excellent job in covering a lot of material.
I go close to you, then you talk here.
Well, it's a pleasure.
I give you a hug.
I think you did an excellent job covering a lot of material. A couple of things which also might be useful to add is, as far as I'm aware, there is one activity which appears to increase energy consumed in the brain, and it certainly also appears to increase cerebral blood flow as well, and that's, oddly enough, willpower. And if you look at it in that sense, exercising willpower is something which generally nowadays we're fairly poor at. And it's interesting that it's one activity which does appear to considerably increase energy expenditure in the brain. You know, so if you look at it in terms of the hedonistic society, it's probably, in that sense, it's kind of one way of understanding why we're not very good at controlling ourselves. And that also relates to, you know, the whole issue of brain structure, and it's not just meditation and so on that alters the brain structure. I mean, you know, I was well known for doing research on nutrition and its effects on things like violence, but also there's growing evidence, for instance, that the kind of modern dietary practices are actually causing our brain to devolve, in other words, to become smaller and simpler. You know, so the whole environmental impact is not just outside, it's also affecting our brain structure as well.
Yes.
So these are very real dangers for our future that we have to take account of.
Thanks, Bernd. I fully agree with that. And I remember also that many times you explained, for instance, that our brains, the dry weight of our brains is mostly made of omega-3 fatty acids. So if we change our diet completely in this sense, we don't know what is effect. Basically, if you look at it, we have changed the way we eat, walk, sleep, live, buy, basically everything very much in the last 250 years in the Industrial Revolution. But we never did randomized clinical trials or scientific research what the effects would be. So we are basically living in a huge evolutionary experiment, not knowing how it will turn out. And I think that science has brought us many things, but it's not only for the better. And we need to take the best of both worlds, the scientific and the spiritual. So I hope that will be possible. Is there any other question? Let me finish. There, Michaela. So Michaela is asking, do you have a specific plan for Shamatha 3? Yeah, or more ideas? Not so specific. It's more like a feeling or an intuition somehow. I think. It's also on a more practical level, as I now have a position also as a researcher at the university, that I have more means for doing things like this. I would very much like to start to just measure people before and after doing meditation. Make it very simple. Go from small steps. This kind of project they did that took about 500 people and $10 million to put something like that. So maybe we should go with low expectation but small steps. But no, I would like to do it in different ways. So not only meditation, but also being here in this environment, going to Albagnano or whatever happening already inside when you decide to go, these kind of things. I would like to do a different. Maybe there are more ideas, so please. Yoga, of course, sure, yeah, and your yoga and the tukur and many different, yeah, of course. Yeah. So you are wondering. I just repeat for people at home. This number of connections and atoms in the world. Yeah. So just to summarize, if you put a 10 and you put there the number, how much you reply it, it's 1 million. So it's beyond thoughts how big it is, and it's more than millions times more than there are atoms in this world. What does it mean? That we have an extreme potential. There is possibilities of all different kind of connections. And we are now using only a very small part of that. This is the main thing we know. And my sense is, if you look at the other research, that the more we are coherent in what we want, just the more not only our thoughts, our feelings, but also our willpower, our energy, everything is aiming for the same direction. It's like the light bulb that becomes a laser, and then you can reach to incredible activities.
Are you able to measure the number of connections in the brain?
Yes.
That means if we take an enlightened being, we could know how many connections.
Yes, so how many connections would an enlightened being have? I have no clue whatsoever. I'm very sure that the brain would be different because of this. But how that would look like, I don't know. I think for me, this number is so huge that it helps to make this feeling that we have infinite possibilities. Also in brain structures, but also in our lives and in our world, if we just go for whatever we think is most auspicious to do. So in this way, it gives me hope in a way. No. No, the vagus nerve regulates more the body, especially the breathing, the heartbeat, and the intestines. And the monkey mind is on a higher level, so it's about here, and it's the default mode network. So it's like if you have some kind of computer and it's on default, it's like some things that continue all the time, even while you're not using it. This is also happening in our brain. So even though we are not using it actively, we're just sitting around a little bit like bored, then there's a lot of things going on. And the problem is that usually, the most of us, we have 70,000 thoughts, which are 80% the same as yesterday, and usually negative. So this is why mindfulness meditation showed that when you become aware of what's inside your mind, then you are less driven by it. And then the monkey mind goes down. But it's not the navel mark. Yes, it goes down when you focus on any kind of task. Then the default mode network goes down because the energy goes to the specific task. But the research was so interesting because nobody thought beforehand that we were always losing so much energy all the time by rumination. And so then when you give it one task, it gets less. But when you do meditation, it gets even better than that, more than a normal task. Yeah. Yes, I think there is. I don't know out of my mind. Yes, she's asking whether there are specific analytical meditation or other types of meditation, specifically the effects on the monkey mind. I don't know out of my head, but I'm sure there is, because I showed you one of the slides where you see all different techniques of meditation are related to different changes in the brain. If you do a mantra, it's different. If you do breathing, it's different. If you do open focused. But the relation specifically to this network, I didn't look into. Yeah.
That the monkey mind stops to jump here and there, and it's not that you are not following it. And the mind is still going like before. You're only thinking that you're not following.
No, actually, it's going less around in time. So the first, I'm repeating the question. The question is the monkey mind. Yeah, is it going on?
With meditation, we learn to don't fall.
Yeah.
It's not that the mind stops to go
No.
here and there.
Now, when you do meditation, you stop to follow. That's true. But after repeating for many times, the going around also goes down. Well, this is what I learned in meditation, and actually what you saw with La Michelle's picture I showed was that his effect when doing no meditation, his mind was calm. So actually here's the proof that it can happen, but I think you have to go for long-term perspective there. Yeah. But it's a very important question, because this is exactly the point I was making. Before, people used to think it's only for a few moments, or it's a little bit less bothering me, but the problem is still there. This is not true if you continue for a long time.
No, that is because you move your attention from your mind,
Yeah.
to your breath.
Yeah. That's first step. Yeah. Moving away the attention is the first step. Then if you do for a long time, then the activity goes down. Yeah. Not completely stop, but the activity goes down. Yeah. It's really proven. And science is saying it, so it's really true. I'm joking. Yes, please. Can I give you this?
Is there any particular research regarding the mind beyond the brain, consciousness beyond the brain? Because I am more and more convinced that mind and body are basically two manifestations of the same on different levels. So if there is any particular research regarding the liver, the kidneys, the lungs, and the whole rest of the body and their activities in relation to our thoughts and emotions and so on? Anything particular on that?
Yeah, two things come to my mind. I'm not an expert in this field, but I learned that one thing is there is a group of consciousness researchers, and they call this the non-locality principle of consciousness, which basically means that consciousness is not only in your brain, and the metaphor they give is we should not see consciousness as a byproduct of cell activity, but we should see consciousness like radio waves, which are everywhere, and brains like a transmitter being able to connect to the radio waves. This is one way. The second one is about, I know there's some research done on people who have had transplantations. And when people have a transplantation of a big organ, then they see sometimes change of personality as well. And that would give an hypothesis that it's possible that there's a part of the mind connected to the organ even though the person is not there. Yeah.
just one thing that, thinking, how to say, just, Matthias, when you make the question about how would be the mind of someone enlightened, no? My point is that whatever is our mental state, emotional state, sure, we will see it also in our body and brain. But there is something which is consciousness beyond the brain. And there is one of the important things for me, which in Buddhism is very clear, but it's the fact that the deeper levels of changes that we do in our mind, they continue even from life to life. So it is something that actually, this is a good news actually, you know? Because otherwise we shape our brain with so much effort and we die. You know?
Start again.
Then we need to start again from scratch. But actually, this is one of the points, no? Because when we did this thing that I saw, okay, that I don't have this sort of monkey mind, and actually I never had since I was a child. And I don't think this is because I meditate a lot, because I don't. It's because I was born like this. This is thanks to previous lives. So this is what we call a tukul, basically, no? So the good news is that the efforts that we do and we gain, they remain somewhere, which scientifically we don't, I don't know if there is any way how to describe it. But the fact is that there is something that we call the very subtle mind, together with the very subtle body, that continues always. So this is something that is much beyond. So I think that when you think about a Buddha, the brain of a Buddha would be quite particular, but the mind of a Buddha, it's much beyond the brain and the body. It's something that goes much beyond it. So this is just one thought, reflection.
Yeah, Elkina is mentioning the morphogenetic fields as one kind of guiding principle. And the most famous, of course, taught by Rupert Sheldrake about when monkeys from one island learned a new trick, then all of a sudden monkeys from another island, which were not in contact, they also learned the trick, or they were able to do, and that suggests that there's some kind of field where consciousness is in all together, not only in one person, but also in a group, or in a flock of birds, or in fishes, or in all of these things. There are many theories about consciousness. I think there's a tendency now to see consciousness less as only in our skull and more in different ways. Morphogenetic fields is one, what Lama was explaining is one, and also the non-locality principle of consciousness, which I think is the most in the scientific literature, which is kind of similar to what Lama was saying. I think finished, no? Thank you. Tomorrow we have 2 more days. Maybe if you like to join, Paula and Ketty are here, and Elkina, we are talking with your students. Maybe you'd like to say, Ketty, for people who are interested to join? Okay.
So there is a workshop on specific for the master students who is a master in psycho-oncology. So the field is oncology, but most of them actually are psychologists, and we decided together with Professor Paola Muti to do the workshop here because of what you heard. It is very interesting, wonderful lecture by Rogier. So I hope all of you can join. Some talks will be in Italian, some in English, but there will be the translation. So we will go through scientific evidence and how the stress and how we live impact in our immune system, and how this may be related to cancer, and how meditation and mind disciplines can interact with the stress response and the immune system. And Elkina and Rogier will give us some interesting talks on how lifestyles can impact on these, and also along all the pathways, so from diagnosis to end of life also. So I hope you will be here and able to join. And
Michelle's also here tomorrow at 10.
of course, sorry. Sorry. This is the main point, I think. So I apologize. But obviously, Lama Michel will integrate and connect maybe with practical, possibly, practical activities. Will integrate what people less able to or less trained in mind disciplines with evidences from science. So I think it will be an interesting adventure for all of us, and I hope for our students.
Thank you.